No, it's okay. It's like
Okay, you can start.
Let's take it back to South Africa. Youth of 1976. This was a time of oppression, a difficult time for South Africans, especially South African youth. Those are the futures, those are the leaders of tomorrow. Those people are the leaders that we have today. They were taught in Afrikaans, a language they never understood. But imagine they conceded and agreed with whatever they were being told. That's exactly what personality B is. You concede to other people's ideas to try and accommodate everybody else. We as House Proposition are happy to propose that we do not agree with, we do not prefer personality B. We prefer personality A, where there's individual independence and where one is able to articulate and maintain their own ideas and able to voice out whatever opinion they have. In South Africa, there's a term used, "Uzoyithola kanjani ihlele khoneni." This basically means you have to fight for everything that you want. You won't get it by just sitting. Now this takes us to these highly competitive societies. In this debate, that is India and China as examples. Right. Personality A. What does it look like? This is a personality with individual independence. They're able to articulate and maintain their own ideas. They're able to voice out and place weight on acknowledged decision making and wherever disagreements will also persist, right? In highly competitive societies, for example, like India and China, with children, we want children with the personality traits of A as opposed to personality B, right? It is very necessary and very important in these states to compete for jobs. Give me a second, sorry. In a highly competitive state, like India and China, you find people competing for jobs, you find people competing to be in positions at a later stage, right? All these people, we need to understand that they're all from different backgrounds. So it is important that we instill the mindset or the personality traits of personality A, which in this case we did explain that these people are able to advocate and maintain their own ideas and also get their opinion across without the fear of contradiction. So with these people coming from different backgrounds, that means they've experienced different things and different issues. So it is important for you to fight for everything that you want in life. Hence, personality A basically builds anything, a mechanism for you to be able to do so. Teaching them to be adamant on getting their voices heard is very, very much important. So that in any situation that you may be, it might be amongst your peers, it might be amongst a job one day, you're able to stand on what you say and without fearing on being contradicted. And also if you are contradicted or you find yourself that you are wrong in this situation, whatever the case may be, you're still able to stand and be adamant and get your impact across, or the impact of your argument across. So then we ask ourselves, who is this debate about? This debate is about children who become marginalized in society. By marginalized, sorry. These children, by marginalized by society, these children would be children that, sorry, no, denied, sorry. Okay. Who is this debate about? This debate is about children who become marginalized in society. So these are individuals that we do not have necessarily a voice, because we grow up in a world where you are told that this is, as a child, there are certain things that you are not allowed to say. Like you can't talk back to your parents, you can't talk back to elders, whatever the case may be. But then it covers the fact that, okay, you are trying to get an argument across or a point across, but then you are told to be a child, sit at the corner, or whatever the case may be. But then Scott's proposition does not prefer those personality traits because there's personality traits of B, and they are basically advocating a world where children are just gonna sit there and accept whatever is being said by someone else and are not able to stand there and advocate for what they believe for and be able to stand for what they believe in. Before I move into my argument, I'd like to take a POI.
Do you think oppression is caused by power dynamics or personality? Do you think oppression is caused by power dynamics or personality?
Okay, so with oppression, so we asked whether oppression is caused by power dynamics or passion, right? Oh, personality, sorry. So this, to answer this, it would be a thing of oppression. Okay, I'd like to get into my argument. Sorry. How does this installation look? So this is us basically actively supporting children to be able to take action and be able to advocate for themselves from a very young age. So this would be parents, teachers at school, whatever the case may be, us telling them that listen, it's okay to take decisions, it's okay to be your own person, it's okay to have thoughts and get your opinions across about certain things, and also yes, basically teach children these traits from a very young age and actively support them throughout so that they're able to even survive in the real world one day. So then this takes me to who gets to control societal narratives. Individuals who are not marginalized would, it would be individuals who are not marginalized, individuals who do have voices in society, and then also individuals with influence. So people who do have money, people who do have political influence, etc. So those are the people who get to control the societal narratives. So then our principle would be that the expression of one's voice is justified when the world is unkind. So then our claim would be weaponize of voice is then justified because the world already punishes people if they do not develop a voice. So this means that if you do not take a decision independently for yourself, then the world will take a decision for you. It's either you act or they act for you. And then B, the formation of ideas independently allows children to value themselves outside, and then also the fear of difficult, and then also it gets rid of the fear of difficult situations. So this precedence that itself, it sets, justifies the weaponizing of this child's voice. Then it is also very necessary to emphasize individuality in society to be able to achieve this goal of getting people to have or children in this case, to have the personality traits of A. So the world is already has specific preferences, which means that people are already not for you. People are already selfish by themselves. So then, if you don't do it for you, no one will. So then competitive states, no one, ones do not provide justice for those who are created. I've never been happy to
Yeah. Thank you, first Paul, for your speech. At this point in time, I'd like to call upon the first opposition speaker, yeah.
So I'll start my speech in my native word. In personality B world, I would have gone quiet in the prep room, been quiet and just cared about the arguments I'm going to run in this debate. In that case, I was going to run something which is very inconsistent, and we were going to lose this debate to Bauhouse. But because that's not what we did, we're going to win. That's how collectivism works, and that's what we tell you in our case. 3 things in my speech. Number 1, engagement. 2nd, characterization. Number 3, constructive. First, on why we think the idea of instilling individualism is comparatively bad, and 2nd, why individualism in general leads to worse outcomes for individuals. But quickly, I want to call proposition out on 2 things that make them behind this debate. The first thing, just to say, what instilling look like. From this point, we're still wondering, what does instilling look like on side proposition? Because the best we can get from them is just say, oh, we think when individuals are instilled like this way, they're going to grow up like this. We're still questioning, how does instilling look like? Maybe their second does that, but we think it's something that was supposed to come first, so the challenge is already losing. Second, they make this debate about oppression. We think this debate is about any oppression that happens in any way. Oppression is not what personality is all about. It's all about power. I do not oppress you because my personality is like that. I oppress you because I have the power to do so. We think this debate about opportunities that exist and whether when we live in a highly competitive society, you're going to make it because you're individualistic or communistic. But quickly, I want to go to engagement. What are the ideas you get from first? The first idea is just say, oh, we think when you share ideas, you're not going to share your ideas when you're individualistic. We don't think this is true. 2 reasons then. The first idea said when you are individualist, right, there's someone who believes that your ideas are the best, in terms where you can collaborate with other individuals and come up with better ideas, you're going to keep quiet because you want to go into the room and actually do the best. In terms where those ideas are bad, you're likely going to fail. Second is the idea that when you're individualistic, right, there's no collaborative discourse that happens because in instances when other people try to convince you that what you're saying is wrong, you're going to say, oh no, I'm right because you're like that and you want to always be right every time. Second, we think competition for opportunities, like they say, oh, competition for opportunities is won by individualism. We don't think this is true. In highly competitive societies, there are a lot of smart people that exist. There are a lot of people with capacity to make it in life. In those instances, you are chosen into opportunities, not because you're the highly competitive person, like most academic best person, but the one more into you. For example, you can work with others well and you can do better in rounds. Third, notice, they say your voice is lost when you engage in collectivism. We don't think it's particularly true because of 2 reasons. The first idea is just to say, no, we think the idea to say, like your voice is lost is particularly untrue. In instances where you're individualistic, you're not going to share this voice anyways. In instances where you do, there's never really some level of discourse that happens in those particular instances. But notice, they try to frame the debate in a very bad way by saying, oh, the language oppression happened and because someone is individualistic, they're able to get out of it. But notice, we think in June, in Soweto, people marched against the oppression in high schools. That's the time when people got to recognize like black people in South Africa could get into particular schools. That was only achieved because young people got into the streets collectively and marched against such things. If they are supposed to prove that collectivism is not something which brings some level of change, they need to do more than what they did. They say, oh, those with money control the narrative anyways, and don't think they're likely going to be better. 2 responses. The first thing is that they lie. We think that ability to still voice your voice still exists either side of the house. Even in collectivism, the idea of being a collective means I can share my opinions with others and get what they think. Even secondly, we think the idea that makes you not share, like not oppose your parents when they say things because you lie on them, which means the idea they're trying to push is not that like you are your parents or something like that. It's just like you depend on your parents and therefore you're not going to do this. But quickly before I go into like my characterization, I'll take that.
Why is a group of individuals who are individualistic not enough for the community on our side?
Chair, we think the individualism that they have is like going to let them like not to have anything collective that they do. Why? Because when one person raises an idea, they're going to try to push that idea at the end. They're not willing to compromise anything for the betterment of that particular group. We think in those instances, there's no progression that happens like proposition. Don't let them tell you anything. But quickly, what is like instilling looks like in proposition? We think it looks like for 1 being individualistic and 2nd being highly like doing things like in academics like highly standardized. We think on our side type B, we think we try about compassion, empathy, and collaboration in those instances. We think our people are likely going to want to get into communities and build communities that last. But notice, this is likely going to be highly influential when it comes to academics, etc. Because you're likely going to be better when you work with other groups of people and other individuals who are better in areas where you're not good at. This is like someone who is not very good at like Shona and other indigenous language, getting individuals who are good at that and share the knowledge. Which means you're likely going to be more successful even in high school in those particular instances work with other people. But second, let's notice how highly competitive societies look like. The first thing, there's more academic competencies. We think in those instances, vast majority of people that exist in these countries are people who are obviously like smart. We don't think in India or China or in other countries that people are like generally dumb, which means we are going to take it for any opportunity. You do more like just being someone intelligent. We think we are likely going to opportunities because you do more like extracurriculars and community volunteership and sports, which highly require you to collaborate with a particular team in those instances. But notice, when you get jobs, you are likely going to be promoted and get more success in the particular jobs. Instead of when you teamwork with others, you're like going to get, like, even when you work as an individual, you're like going to need to work with other people. For example, they kept there to organize with other people to make the tournament a success. But quickly to our first argument, when instilling individualism is inherently bad. Notice, we think the claim is very simple. We think harm, like mental harm is put upon children. Instances where they're forced to, like, when this like knife is like put upon them. What's the proof of principle? We think the process causes a harm. First on academics, we think in instances when you think you're like going to be individualistic, you don't want to work with other individuals. The problem is that you think you're always right and therefore you're like going to fail. Instances when you fail, you're going to think, oh, I'm a weak person, I'm the reason why the team failed because I was the only person who was in that particular team. It looks like you and Kaden being like the team captain of this team and being individualistic. Instances where we fail, it's like, oh, I'm the bad person who failed, which means that there's mental harm that happened to Kaden in those particular instances. But second, what's the proof of this principle? We think children are a protected class. First, we think we have obligation their innocence and to avoid that like mental harm that happens to them. And we think that particular process that happens is something which is harmful. The impact that on our side at least, we get children who are able then to collectively engage with other students, leading some level of success. But second, on why we think individualism is bad. 3 layers of analysis to this. Number one, you never work by yourself. Notice, in most instances, individuals are never going to work by themselves. There's always someone who's supposed to contribute to collective work. If that's the case, then it means success is more likely to happen when you have other people around you. It looks like a doctor, even other people can work in the office to make things happen. But if you're someone who's individualistic in a company, you're likely going to contribute, and therefore there's no level of development that happens. If a country is highly competitive, right, it means a lot of individuals want to get that particular opportunity, but instead of working and collaborate with others, they're going to be chosen because they see you're good people. But also notice, there's constructive discourse on our side. Why? Because there's more progression where people are empowered simply because they can share their ideas with a particular group. We think children take things seriously and to a great extent. When children are instilled with knowledge that tells them you're just supposed to stay as you are, don't share what you think of like with others, they're like going to trickle down to many other things. For example, in academics, they don't share their work with others and therefore others still do the same thing. They don't get that level of benefit which they need in high competitive states. Second, when they get into jobs, they're like going to die trying to be CEOs and never really becoming a manager in anything, simply because you cannot collaborate with others and therefore the development that you need is never going to work. But notice, the comparative that exists on proposition, even from second speech, which shows how they want to win, is simply to say, they're like, oh, when you are individualistic, right, you're going to get the pinnacle. But what you tell me then is we need an analysis on why are you going to get the pinnacle of success in instances where you choose to just stay by yourself and never really come to collaboration with others. Then tell us how you're going to make some level of success just working as an individual and not having other individuals working with you. Notice the mutual exclusivity of this argument. Two things. Number one, they need to prove why on their side to take this argument they can never achieve a level of success just working on them on their own. And second, why there's more progression in individuals working individualistic and never work with others. A community that tells children just stay by your own, you are going to make it in life is a community that wants the society to die and will never be more proud to oppose.
Thank you. First op speaker for the speech. At this point in time, I'd like to call upon the second op speaker, And I would like to advise the audience to please maintain silence. Thank you.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. An 18-year-old entering into a highly competitive society and having the idea that they need to fight for their ideas and they need to be able to defend themselves was always going to be a world that we prefer over an 18-year-old that goes into the world and is likely always going to succumb to the pressure when individuals tell them that they don't value them as individuals. This debate was always going to be about a child who's likely going to enter this really competitive world. understanding that this is an individual whose mindset is likely going to be the initial thing that we introduce them to in the real world, they needed to do a sufficient enough job to prove why it was justified that this individual, the first instance of them entering into this new world, was always going to be to back out at every single inconvenience. Because unfortunately, panel, a highly competitive society was always going to provide pushback, was always going to tell them that they are not good enough because of the fact that they come from a poor environment. We don't think that was ever going to be justified to expose individuals to harm that we knowingly know that we can prevent. We're so very proud to oppose. What am I going to be doing in my speech? A couple of things. First, I'm going to clarify strategically why we're winning this debate. Second, I'm going to deal with the responses that they give on their side. And then I'm going to give you an extension about why it's important for this idea of individuals being individualistic to persist within society. Firstly, I'd like to note that a person's personality isn't in isolation of the actions that they commit, i.e., it influences the types of life that you are likely to live. It influences the way that you perceive society. This is to say that, for example, Donald Trump being a narcissist likely means that even good ideas like capitalism, he's always going to find a way to make sure that it harms individuals within society. We think it was weird for them to say that like oppression isn't something that is a conversation within today's debate, because the reason why individuals feel entitled to power in the first place is because they fed this idea that what they want is always something that they're going to get. They needed to show to us specifically why, if you feel obligated to being in power, why this isn't likely tied to your personality. But secondly then, why is it that individuals who are the most marginalized are the most vulnerable within these societies? Notice that highly competitive societies are ones where individuals that are able to be the most successful are individuals who, one, have influence. That is to say that if you have the most amount of money and you have the most amount of political influence, you are the one whose narrative is likely going to be the most persistent within those societies. That is to say then, this motion then is specifically important for individuals who do not have access to those things that can make their life significantly better. That was the actor that was the most vulnerable. They need to engage these marginalized individuals because these individuals only have their voice. If you tell them that their voice is something they need to silence, you don't give them anything else to defend themselves. But thirdly then, notice how on their side, they aren't able to show to us specifically why it is true that they're going to be able to protect this individual in a world that is inherently selfish. I.e., the fact that we're even competing in the first place likely shows you that people care about what they can get for themselves as opposed to caring about a broader community. They aren't able to show to us why a world that does exist like that is one, likely going to want to build a community that is actually genuine. They aren't able to show to us why these communities are what that people are going to buy into, especially if this is a competitive environment. Down the strategy, let's deal with their argumentation. One, their response to our principle is one that tells us that discourse isn't something that's going to happen because people are individualistic. One, this assumes that a community of individuals is always going to be something that's important, specifically within high, competitive environments. But secondly, I'd like to engage them in the instance where this community is something that's important. They aren't able to show to us specifically why a group of individuals that are individualistic isn't enough of a community. And that is to say then, they aren't able to show to us why the discourse that you have going back and forth about why you think that your argument is valid within a specific setting is something that is justified. I mean, debating is literally about the idea that you believe in your idea so much that you're willing to defend it. Why is it that the discourse that we have here isn't discourse that is important? But I think even then, the discourse that we have at the point in which individuals actively believe that their voices are ones that need to be defended are the ones that actually get progression. Because at the end of the day, we are left with an impact that is to say that even if I don't get out what I want, the impact of what I said is something that you need to have on your side. But secondly then, notice the harm that they present to us on our side. They tell us that one, people are always going to think that they are right, and secondly then, they have some sort of obligation to the innocence of children. One, I don't necessarily understand why people who are going to be told that, I don't necessarily understand why people always thinking they are right is an inherently bad thing, especially if the reasoning behind why they think it is right is because of the actual circumstances that they face. That is to say then, the reason that people are actively going out into societies and saying that they need access to healthcare, and the fact that they're not going to stop at the chance of getting this healthcare is because of the fact that they are actually able to feel what it's like to not have this healthcare. I don't necessarily understand why people being obligated to the fact that the reason they voice out their opinions is because those opinions are ones that are valid to them. Why is it that them thinking that they're right is something that is not okay? Because individuals who think that they're oppressed, the fact that they always think that they're oppressed isn't something that's specifically harmful necessarily engage why it's important for individuals that exist within marginalized communities, why it's always okay for them at the point of inconvenience, which is almost inevitable on their world, is likely something that they're okay with. Secondly, with this idea of an obligation to their innocence, one, I don't necessarily understand why if their side is going to prefer a world where people just shrink at the point of inconvenience is something that is actually going to protect their innocence, because we think it makes them even more vulnerable to individuals just trampling over them. We think our principle was far more important, because what was it? We told you that it's important for individuals to weaponize their voice. This is because A, the world already punishes you if it is that you do not develop a voice. That is to say that individuals with influence are always going to tell you what it is that you have to do. Individuals within apartheid South Africa were told that they are going to live within Bantu stands. If they didn't voice that they wanted to live in other parts of the world, they were not going to be living in there. But secondly then, we told you that the formation of ideas independently allows individuals to develop a value for themselves outside of people. This is specifically important because in order for you to form part of a community, you need to be able to understand that there's an inherent value to you as a person first. I.e., we think in these communities that they're likely to build on their side, we don't necessarily think why it is true that people are always going to be able to voice out their opinions if it is that they already don't think that they're valid, right? This principle was important because it shows you why it's important that individuals' voices are ones that we actively condone, at the point at which the world is a terrible place. But my extension then on why we think that the establishment of one's ideas is effective for individuals but also for social justice. We think A, on our side, if it is that individuals walk into the real world with the understanding that their views are ones that always should be heard, we think that there's a unique ability for society to always prove to you that in as much as you are right, the ability for you to not get that change is something that's important. What are we saying here? We're saying it's far better on our side for you to get into the real world and be humbled by the realization that not everything that you want is something that you're going to get. But we think on a net, what does this mean? It means that then, even in our worst case, where we have people going into the real world and understanding that sure, they might always have their voices, but they're not always going to get what they want, it's important that this realization is something that is natural. I.e., we don't think it's important then to prefer a world where you teach individuals initially to be silent because we don't think you're ever able to develop that voice in the first place. On our side, when we tell you that you have a voice and you should use it, we're okay to get silent later because the idea that you know that it exists. We're proud.
Yeah, thank you, second pop speaker. We'll speak point in time. I'm going to call upon the second pop speaker. Yeah.
May I please confirm that I'm going to move my hand like this? Okay. I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. The same way that side proposition fails to listen to a man's speech is the same way that the average individual is not going to listen when others speak, is not going to be able to be collaborative, is not going to be able to better society. If you ever wanted a better society in this highly competitive world, you always vote inside opposition. So proud to oppose. After this is the speech, then 2 to the strategy, then I'm going to give you a few direct responses and an extension as to why specifically teaching children these types of things is so harmful. 2 to the strategy. 1. The majority of their case is so outcome-based. No, this was a debate about the process of instilling this type of personality A or personality B. And one tells them when you instill personality A, it looks like they're actively telling these children who are impressionable and young that you are always right. You have to do everything for yourself. People around you are going to be wrong. You have to be the type of individual who can be and rely on yourself. You're much happier to tell them that people around you are also right and they also can be right. And when they explain more why, specifically when you actively instill these types of harmful narratives within children, it is so wrong. 1. But 2, the process of how these things appear in the education system is so terrible for people. We're not going to actively prove to us why when you install these types of things it's not going to be actively harmful. They're going to lose this debate. But secondly, panel, they're kind of trying to argue on the extreme. actively have like a very competitive personality, that if somebody kicks me in my eyes, I am going to sit at them and say, hey, I'm sorry, it's fine. Panel, this won't speak to my first response. But generally on this entire idea of oppression, I'm going to tell you this, which is very, very simple. Oppression is something which is about power, it's not something which is about personality. Which is that the reason why individuals are able to be oppressed, the reason why people were oppressed within apartheid South Africa wasn't because they were weak timid people and because they didn't believe that like these were wrong things which were happening. It is because they had no power to change these things. I don't then ever understand why just because you now think that yes, I should be able to not speak in Afrikaans, now I'm going to be able to topple down the government, now I'm going to be able to remove this entire oppressive regime. Within generally people are still able to agree that on the idea that there were going to be individuals who they come under collectivism and say that these are wrong things. So if I'm going to agree, why would I agree with the oppressors instead of agreeing with people who agree with the natural God? I never understood why individuals like to just agree with really, really terrible, stupid things just because they're like a personality type B. But secondly, it is just wrong that people only act because of their personality. They act because of stimulus, they act because of what is happening. If I can't feed my family because I don't have the proper education, I want to go to the streets and riot about education, and that's what people actively do. They respond to a stimulus. It was never going to be true thing that because somebody has a personality type B, that they're going to allow oppression, that they're going to allow people to step all over them. This is like something like this was more going to be a debate about collaboration in things like workspaces, because personality matters more when there aren't external stimulus, when there's always going to be much stronger counter-narrative than wow guys, I'm a little bit shy when it comes to things which are generally so important to you, which are so impactful to how you live your life. We know it's very ridiculous for them to make us like try and like support this, but even if we didn't believe them, we never then understood why they are suddenly able to create all of this power, to be able to topple down oppression, to be able to change all of these very, very difficult things. The implementation of this is very, very simple. We don't have people who are dolls outside of the house, who can't do anything, who don't think for themselves. We have people who are able to actively think about these types of perspectives. Within the doubt in this debate, it becomes that individuals are some individuals outside of the house are going to be much more authoritarian, they're going to like actively push this type of thing, they're going to like want themselves to be heard more. On outside of the house, people are still going to talk about these things, they're still going to discuss, but they're willing to be wrong, they're willing to look into other different perspectives, and they're told that that is something which is acceptable. We think we are fine to die on that hill, we are fine to die on that stance. Second general idea here is about the idea of opportunities, and how you only get opportunities because you have like a lot of power and a lot of influence. Critically, this is just not true. Zero analysis from that outside that is true. Generally, this looks like things like politics and like being in the top spaces. We are fine to get to not everybody's going to be like the president of the United States. But for the general opportunities that most people care about in these types of societies, which is like jobs, which is like being in a university, you get into these types of things from what the one tells you. When you're somebody who's collaborative, when you're somebody who has like extracurriculars, like being in debate and being in a team and listening to each other, you're much more likely to be successful in these types of things. It helps you with your college applications, it helps you actually just be a better person. People are gonna like you. When people actively like you, you have a better community around you, you have more friends around you. This is generally things make you a better person, whereas something is also that's generally important. Within game, all of that, this idea of opportunities, it's only to talk about like fame and like power and influence. I don't understand, or just because I have an active personality, that I'm suddenly going to become Donald Trump. Within generally, the people who actively oppose in this announcement house are people like Donald Trump who don't listen about these types of things, who are unwilling to listen when individuals try to speak out about their own struggles, about like when these types of political debates, without something which is like generally bad, who don't support such people anyway. It's one to argue that Donald Trump is so bad. Donald Trump is literally a personality type A person, and that's like a very, very good case for them to run. Before I go on to like my extension, I'll take that point.
Why is it super important to be like a face of what you actually want to do?
Realistically, panel, these things that we're talking about are not the deepest things. I think if this was a debate about oppression, I think people would still be able to respond to the idea of oppression. There's more likely to be about things which are much more neutral, whether or not we actively like work on this project on Tuesday or Friday, whether or not we go out for tea or coffee, whatever it might be. I think there's a much bigger difference between things which are active oppression and are harming you to a structural degree where it affects your entire quality of life, and things which are probably going to be such marginally important towards your life. Or things like things like how who's going to be the leader of a team project, for example. Yes, it can affect your life. It will affect your life to the degree we want to talk about. When that is something which like you're not able to do this idea, and people like sitting down and allowing themselves to be like actively harmful in that regard. Extension here again as to why they can generally benefit like these individuals within childhood. First of all, it is down to argue this case of what individuals ought to be like so authoritarian to be able to enter into these like very, very high positions in workplaces. I think we could still learn that. I think people were generally taught to be CEOs. They are taught how to delegate work. They are taught all of these things at a later stage. They didn't need to tell us why specifically I need to learn as a child, an impressionable child, whether I can take things to a much greater extent, but I can take these things to a much like further extent, or is actually going to be something which is like not so harmful degree. You can still learn these types of skills later on in life. I think they can't just say that people don't have these types of skills. They are still able to get them when they're going to be within those positions. But secondly, we think that generally, when individuals told us at a very young age, they become individuals who are much worse off. It's just like things like individuals, like when people just generally become more insufferable. People aren't willing to like see other people's sides. People always going to be out with other people. Nobody's going to like you. Nobody's going to want to be your friends. Because generally, that community would say or tells you about when we're always arguing with each other. It's not a true community. Community comes from being able to understand each other. Community comes from being able to have different perspectives, but still be able to come together and still be friends. When you're a person in type A, you are never going to have that level of mutual discourse. You're always going to have that level of only wanting to be right, only wanting to agree with each other. It's not about that community which you talk about. There's going to be something which is just generally not able to get the major benefits that you want to get from community. When people are generally just not going to actually be able to have valuable discourse, which allows for them to be able to be that level of liking each other. When generally then people who are children are going to be much more harmed because inherently like individuals who are children need to have things like community, they need to have things like friends and people who actually like them in that regard. When you get much more like them, individuals who are able to be friends and have that level of ability to just have enlightenment of their life. When it literally in highly competitive societies, there's a much bigger focus on academics. When you already focus on academics because you need to go to crime school and you need to get into the rich university, when you're only focusing on yourself, you actually then aren't able to buy into the types of benefits like having that level of community already. When you're further pushed from the community and who is generally don't like you as a person, you're much more likely on this side of the house to be an individual who's isolated, who's like most likely to be an outcast, who just doesn't allow you as a child to live the best life, to sound like you're the greatest regard. You're not somebody of being an individual who gets a little bit walked over, but you have friends, you have a community around you, and you're able to enjoy life. When you are struggling with homework, you can have somebody help you with that. You're able to be a part of group projects. On this side of the house, you always want to do things by yourself. You don't want to struggle by yourself, and somebody who's asking somebody else for help. You don't want to do the type of projects by yourself, and be somebody who's able to ask people to actually exist in that regard. We think generally on side opposition, you're going to be an individual who is better for the community. We are so proud to defend this community. We are proud to oppose.
Thank you again of speaking speech. As point in time, I'd like to call upon the third opposition speaker. There is no proposition.
Between individuals, we think that at a certain point in time, they might reach a set of a conclusion to say that this is how we move on. We think that opposition in and of itself decides to take entirely out the fact that you need to have some sort of discourse when you are going to like some sort of like argument for you to have a good discourse about what you need to factor in. But cool, when we talk about how we have to have the people like the marginalized, how we have to cater for the marginalized individuals, and we think that some of our case it goes unresponded on opposition. Okay, cool. Two things I'm going to provide in this debate within of itself. Cool. First, we're going to provide while at age, we're going to provide our strategy, how we have, why we win on strategy, also other strategic inconsistencies, but we're going to win on clashes too. We're going to impact our debate, the motion, we're going to impact our clashes based on these two things, the magnitude and the reversibility of how this debate is going to go when it comes to this highly competitive states and need to cater for the students. But cool, we think that for these children, strategically, we think that on the opposition side, we think that case is under-recognized. If it is so true that an individual is supposed not to argue or to just sit down and to listen, we think that there needs to be someone who leads that certain discourse. They say that there's someone that needs to be there to take on that certain discourse, and we don't even get who is that person, who are they to take that discourse, and they don't even engage with that. Basically, so under-recognized. But they ignore when we say, when someone wants power, or when someone thinks that they have power, they feel entitled to something, or when, and so and so. I think that we talk them out strategically on that. But we think that second, and then we think that when a child, we think on our side, we're going to be better for a child, is to say that we are going to teach them for the real world. What opposition then denies is the context that we bring here. The context that we bring here is that in individuals, the real world is not pity. The real world is going to treasure. The real world is there going to be competitive enough to take things away from you, and that's what we talk about. But cool, I'm going to engage with this debate on certain things like how you win, on certain things like even if they talk about how this debate is not on the oppressive side, or but cool, we're going to engage them on that too, on how like we're going to engage them on how they said that this debate is not also about the oppression. We're going to engage them on that level, and also that on our level in that best case scenario. Cool. I think we're going to go into something like justification and to show you why we're much more better. On opposition side, you see that being individualistic can mean that you do not share your information, or you do not agree with ideas if you feel like you're not there, or if you feel like you do not really need to concise or to take out or to voice your idea. The fact that you're not voicing out your idea, the fact that you're sitting right down there and not even voicing out your idea means that you're marginalized because you're too scared to say whatever you want. We think as a kid, if you're being instilled as a kid, that if you're being taught as a child to instill certain narratives, to instill certain personalities, like personality A, we think that you're much more likely to engage in discourse in the best way possible. We think that their world looks like for example, the youth of 1960 engaging with apartheid government and say that okay, cool, we think so because they think that they're going to get opportunities when it comes to their opportunities clash. What we're going to talk about then is about how they say that there is more collectivism on their side. Because you agree with other individuals, this causes a harm when you are likely not to communicate with other individuals. This is to say you're not likely to have engagement that lacks on the opposition side. We think that if individuals are more likely not to engage with you, you need to prove to yourself what we think that we told you on our side, that it's much more better, or likely it's much more better for you to say that I rather go away knowing that I can prove my side. But we think that engagement within of itself is something that individuals in the long run can ignore, like how the position side. We think that individuals are more likely to engage in the partner side because you have something to prove. We think that when individuals come together and say that we want to prove something to the world, when they say that we want to have something to the world, they're much more better, it's often said. Because we think that individuals, when they come together and agree on saying that, okay, this is what I'm going to do, even if they say that in these individuals are going to point at each other, we think that discourse happens, we think that the conclusion happens, like this debate right now, we're having a debate amongst each other, and this is to say we are arguing against each other, there is going to be a conclusion that needs to be met and shared now. Cool. When we think here we're much more better on the justification level, we think that these children are more likely to say that, okay, we need to be ready for the real world. We think that when we instill certain values, we think that in a highly competitive country, they have a lot to fight for, they have a lot to go for, like jobs, facilities, and things like that. We think that the opposition side decides to ignore our case on two things. We tell you that A, these individuals are marginalized, but two, we think that these individuals are marginalized in certain different circumstances or certain different situation. This is to say that even if you're in a space, you need to be able to voice out yourself. You need to be able to voice out your personalities. The truth is that they propose a world where we live in kumbaya and we all agree with whatever we want to say within of itself. I think here this is to say that individuals need to instill personality A on their kids or whosoever, on their kids or their children, as the motion says, at a very young age, because it teaches them the very skills of how to engage, on how to discern certain things. We think that discernment is something that really an individual needs to have, and we think that this discernment is only exclusive on our side. The minute you learn that you're going to have some sort of like engagement skills, or say that okay, we think that we're supposed to engage on A, and we think that we're supposed to engage on B. Not that on the opposition side, they debate the extremities of this debate, whereby we don't engage with each other, or whereby we don't actually want to argue, or we say that we were taking off each other's ideas, and so. But cool, let me take the POI.
Okay, if your road is so bad, you don't have people around you to help you in that creative real world, rather than going through it by yourself.
We think that you're not going to go through it by yourself. We think that in that terrible world, where those individuals are also facing the same thing that you're facing, and you talk to each other, and you say that we have to go against another group because of what they said or how they oppose us, we think that those individualists are going to come together and have some sort of collectivism. This is something that they decide to ignore when we tell you that they're individuals with shared crime. We think that these individuals, I like you to talk it out. These individuals, I like you to have a conclusion on whatever they want to do. We think that discourse, we think for a discourse to be effective, argumentation needs to happen. Cool. Who controls societal realities? The upper class. These individuals are individuals that decide on what you have to do and what you don't have to do. Opposition declines that. But cool, when it goes to that under-marginalized argument, when they tell us that when you go into a room and you're going to talk to certain individuals and someone is going to tell you that there's going to be a conclusion, we think that those individuals that are going to make decisions for you are the upper class that they choose not to ignore with, but cool, not to go with. But cool, on the second clash of advocacy, on proposition side, we tell you that we weaponize the voice of marginalized of individuals, we weaponize their own voice, and these individuals can have voices and voice out their concepts. We told you that there's need to be effectiveness to see that if you want discourse, you need to be able to argue. We think that we're effective with the magnitude and the probability scale of you being able to get whatever you want and whatever you want to fight for, because we think that you want power, we think that you want to be competitive, we think that you want to be better than other individuals, we think that you want to be able to voice out your concerns. What we will tell you then that the reversibility on their side is if you do not teach a child not to voice out their voice from a very young age, and to tell them that they need to be whatever they want or whatever they have to agree with other individuals, we think that individual won't be ready for the real world when they have to protest for jobs with them so far.
Thank you to the folks who gave the speech. At this point in time, I'd like to call on the third opposition speaker.
So I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. They lost this debate in their characterization when they tell you that this debate is about these marginalized individuals. I think my previous 2 speakers already tell you why it's not a debate about the marginalized, but we still think like if they believe that they're oppressors, if they believe they're oppressors within those instances and have experienced these harms that they got like advised about, and that cemented their views on those things, we think those individualistic individuals don't end up doing anything under their side of the house. But secondly, we think if they speak up, they don't get change because the rest of their world is very individualistic and they prioritize themselves. They don't have an incentive to listen to them at the end of the day. This means that these people then come together on our side of the house, and then they have a bigger voice and they're able to strategize because they're collective. We think within those instances, those individuals are actually able to get change. I'll be charitable and also grant them the fact that they're going to have social movements under their side of the house, since they say that they're going to have like 10 people who form a community and will be able to do something within those instances. But we still think like on their side of the house, they don't gain any meaningful traction because individuals are individualistic. They don't care about those 10 individuals. But 2, they don't have an incentive to even listen to those individuals in the first place, right? But we think on our side of the house, people participate because from a young age they've been told that what your community, you're supposed to contribute to your community positively, you're supposed to make your community a better place, right? But thirdly, we then think like the oppressors are also individuals who are going to be getting this like collective idea, right? Which then means at the end of the day, these individuals are actually able to change on our side of the house. Those kids of those rich people who actively oppress them under their side of the house are going to be people who are unlikely going to continue the culture of oppression on these individuals. We think on proposition, they're actually worse. But secondly, onto their idea on like pressure and how these individuals succumb to pressure of people telling you that you're not enough as an 18-year-old wanting to like enter the world that they say they want to enter. We think first, they assume that every single time that this 18-year-old is being told these things, they are being lied to, right? We don't think that this is particularly true because given the fact that you're an 18-year-old, it's unlikely that you have enough experience to be able to even handle those things, right? But secondly, we think that those people that tell you these things existing in like a competitive world and on our side are individuals who are likely going to be gentle individuals because they actively have an incentive to care about the rest of society and they need to contribute positively to society, right? Which means when they tell you these things, if it's something which is true, you're being told in a gentle way and you're likely going to take it and like internalize it in a better manner, which means that you're likely actually going to improve yourself. But secondly, we think these individuals can also encourage you because they know that people don't exist in a vacuum. They know that you need experience and they're likely able to like mentor you within those instances. And on their side of the house, they don't get like any of these benefits at the end of the day. This means on our side of the house, that 18-year-old is actively able to then enter those areas that they tell you that they have like barriers to access to. But secondly, it means when you fail, that people don't say, I told you so, but rather they comfort you and even help you within those instances because they have an incentive to do so. On proposition, when you fail, your ego lets you keep trying to ride a dead horse. It means that they can never actually progress because every feedback is oppression in their mind to their ears. This actively means that even if you're marginalized, your issue is actually never solved because there's no incentive for others to listen to you at the end of the day, nothing at all. But what then do I think that you should like think about during deliberation? Think first, the idea that what happens on both sides is the morphing of like these things into some sort of culture or some sort of narrative, right? The question then becomes, where are these children actually better, right? We think where the children are actually better on a side where they don't have to become an adult at 6 years old because their parents are actively telling you that you should be someone who's like individualistic and you should like just prioritize your thoughts on everything. You should like maintain your own ideas within those instances, right? This means where society can positively respond to issues that these children actively face every single day, assuming that these children are like marginalized people, right? Where society cares about them and they're actually going to do something to change those things. We think on proposition that 6-year-old has to make decisions for themselves. They have to make a meal for themselves every single day because they believe that I should be having like pizza for dinner or those sort of things. But 2, it also means that these individuals, given the fact that they have parents, given the fact that they don't have like the capacity to actively make choices for themselves, this actively means that they're individuals who are unlikely going to have like good things within those instances, which is why the state has to give like the parent the responsibility for these children. That then means that these children under their side of the house are so individualistic. At school, if they feel like homework is something which is pointless, they don't do it. We think like there's some disconnect which then happens. All the systems that are functioning properly because of this collectivism are things that don't then function within those instances. Because these children, if they decide, oh, it's something that doesn't matter, simply because of the fact, like their like personal views are some things which are important and they're actively encouraged to use those views. Think like in those instances, this is something which then actively harms even the future of those children. This means that it can even translate to like these children not listening to their parents because they simply just don't agree that they're supposed to go to bed at 8, even though it's something which is actually beneficial for them at the end of the day, right? On opposition then, it means that these children are not like extremely independent, they have like collectivism. It means that their mother has an incentive to understand that you don't want to have frozen pizza for dinner, right? This means in competitive societies, employers have an incentive to consider you and give you a job, given that you're qualified for that job, right? We think like the pressure that they tell you about is something that you're actually going to be helped with. Then the second thing, which we think is also symmetrical, is the idea that there's development of these traits, right? We think what happens on proposition is that these traits actively morph into things such as selfishness easily, right? That then means that this then makes these children become individuals who are power hungry from a very young age. This means that the exercising of their rights and all these things, they don't care about the consequences of those things. We think the consequences that then arise from those things are things which are very important, right? This means that when they tell you about this whole idea of the youth of 1976, I think that ruler today becomes a person who then rules with an iron fist because they don't care what you actively think about. They just have to prioritize what they think about, and they don't care about what the rest of society thinks. But second, I think during that time, they wouldn't be here today because that would have gotten that person killed, that type of choice that they tell you about. We then think that the purpose of these traits being formed in the first place for personality A, we think it's because people were tired of collective action and needed a platform to be unapologetically themselves. But for personality B, we then think it's because people were so individualistic in an unapologetic manner, so things like discourse would be unable to happen simply because of the fact that they don't have an incentive to at the end of the day. But second, we still think even if in their best case scenario they're able to have discourse, it would likely end up in a gridlock because no one is willing to then adjust to the views of others within those instances. Which then means that even those individuals that they appeal to are individuals who are just going to go ahead with their own views because of the fact that they don't even have an incentive to listen to you, they don't have an incentive to change things for you, only unless those things benefit themselves, which means that these individuals are made to be people who are very selfish, right? The fact that there's no consensus under their side of the house and they've been unable to prove as to why exactly these individualistic people, given that this is a preference notion, would actually be individuals who are able to engage in any sort of discourse, we're very proud to oppose.
Thank you, David Speaker, for that speech. At this point in time, I'd like to call upon the prize speaker from the side of opposition,
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Two sections in this speech. Firstly, I will just generally do on strategy, but secondly, my speech building this debate throughout our content. Fourth is on strategy. One, a very apparent soft line throughout the debate. When we see lines like individual collectivism, where all the individualism when they come together and solve all of these issues, they can see to the fact that collectivism is something which is important and you need people to come together to solve these issues, one. But two, I just never then understood why individuals who are so individualistic can come together to solve issues, why in our very same case, more collective and think about other people, not also care about these types of issues and still want to solve them. I think at the end of that idea, it becomes very highly symmetrical, but this is more backward to their case because the crux of their case and most of their speaker time is people talking about why oppression is so bad, marginalized communities are going to be so harmed. If you're able to prove that you're probably still going to be able to get out of oppression and have things like anti-apartheid movements, when people have one personality trait or another personality trait, we're probably still going to be able to win this debate. But secondly, they really try to put this debate into a very weird and restrictive context. They want us to only talk about the most marginalized, people who have no rights and people who are so oppressed. Not as highly competitive societies. Yes, they are marginalized people, they aren't the majority. Even if you buy into all of their framing on that, they're winning in a very small vote, they're winning in a minority of cases, and that is not enough to win this debate. But secondly, they give themselves a major problem solution gap here, because just because you have a different personality doesn't mean you're able to solve the majority of the problems that they talk to you about and you get from being marginalized. They said it for you to be somebody who is marginalized and to solve these types of issues and to get into high spaces, you need to be somebody who's able to get fame and has power and has influence. I never understood why the poor child from Nyanga is able to get all of those things because they're outspoken. And the rest of the cases say that shouting at your boss is good for the sake of being good, but you never get any change from that. On our case, you're somebody who's able to network, you're able to socialize, your co-workers like you, your boss likes you, you're likely to get the upwards movement, upwards development. You're going to get into a very university because you're part of interact and debate instead of just caring about your grades and only doing that type of thing. We think we're better on that with that regard. But thirdly, I think just ignore the idea of counter narratives throughout the debate, we don't there's already like a very rigid academic narrative within these types of countries. Regardless of in India and China and South Korea, there's like cram schools and the cram school narrative. People are always going to try hard for themselves, but how you try hard is important. Whether you try hard and you only want to help yourself because you actually only care about yourself and you study by yourself, or whether you try hard and you help others, you have group projects, you have group study, that is kind of the doubt again. There was always going to be other narratives, and this is the idea of oppression, just like fully kill it. If somebody shoots me in the face or somebody hits me, I'm not going to like just say it's okay, because that narrative of me, like that idea of me being hurt, in and of itself is enough of a stimulus for me to act. I didn't can't lose this debate on the idea of oppression. It was not well enough recognized. Why did they lose this debate from the first speeches? Because the majority of the case from the first is about this idea of oppression, which I've already taken out, and the idea of opportunity. What is the long way to tell you, which kind of takes this out? One, in terms of the structure of these economies, they are set down the that these types of economies are things that like need you to be like really, really individualistic to be able to succeed. I'm not telling you that's not true. Simply because people need to collaborate within these types of workspaces. You need to actually be able to help people within like a group project. If you're an intern at a law firm, you have to be able to help with your partners. If you're a nurse at a medical school, you have to be able to like treat with the doctors. Being an academic is not going to be helpful within these types of jobs in the first place. We need to be collaborating, but that was so important. But we know that just takes out the majority of the case there. But secondly, we're talking in the second speech about white specifically, it should not be a child. We're talking about how when you actually talk from a young age, that you ought to be individualistic, that you ought to only care about yourself, is going to become something which is a much more harmful thing. You get the very same narcissistic individuals like Donald Trump who oppress people on this and else much more often because people become much more egotistical. They believe they can do no wrong. They believe they themselves and deify because the parents have only told them this. We think it's time for people to learn to be individualistic. Or when they learn to at a very young age, they become bad people who don't want to support bad people. Want individuals to become people who are able to be in the community and be able to like actively have a level of people being coming together. Kenneth then tells you quite a few important things. One of the idea of qualification, how you generally just able to become more qualified, to be able to work with these jobs when you're part of a community, with your ability to access like these types of systems that have support. We think it's also important in that regard, because people are going to be able to have that level of mobility, which allows them to like mitigate most of their benefits. For all these reasons, I'm so proud to oppose.
Thank you, Prize Speaker from Side O. I would like to call upon the Prize Speaker from Side Proposition.
In their world, when anyone told us that Azzy didn't do enough context, I was just going to get up here and say that like, okay, you're right, because I'm going to prioritize things like actively seeking to want to make everybody happy except what I want to actually be achieved. In our world, at the very least, we're going to defend our case up until the end, up until there's nothing we can do about this debate. That was always the comparative. They needed to do a lot more to show why, even in the instance where in our world, we are okay to like settle at some sort of acknowledgement of the idea that you actually have something important, why that in and of itself was something that was also helpful. Two parts of the speech. The first is on strategy. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about why principally who is best for these children, and secondly then, who is better for their survival outside of their parents. Cool. Strategically then, let's actually talk about what their world looks like. Because they want to say that like their world is just the idea of accepting that you can be wrong and that there's always an understanding that comes with that. They don't necessarily engage the full extent of their world, which is to say that individuals are likely to initially deprioritize their own ideas if it is that they're likely to face backlash. But specifically to a competitive society where everybody is competing for something, they don't engage why it's okay for people to tell you that their rights matter more than your rights, their ability to get into the workplace matters than your own. They aren't able to show to us specifically why, in a world that is so competitive, in a world where everybody is hungry for themselves, why it is that people are even going to want to develop a culture of speaking up in the first place if it is that they know that they're always going to be met with backlash and they're always going to want to deprioritize some sort of consensus. It is unclear then why all the benefits about people getting jobs are actually even likely if it is is that they are unable to show that people are always going to speak up in the vast majority of cases. But even when they do speak up, why is that they're actually going to get some sort of change? The principle then, which says who is best for these children, they say that there's an obligation, one, to protect the innocent needs of these individuals, like these children's innocence needs to be something that is protected. Secondly, they tell you that these individuals need to grow up knowing that they can be wrong in order for them to understand that not everything that they want is something that is okay. We told you in principle that A, at the point at which you instill in children the idea that your voice is the only thing that you have and that at every single opportunity you should use it, like we told you in first, we think that that's a far more principle, that's a far better principle to these children specifically, especially if they're likely to encounter individuals who don't necessarily care about them in the long run when they are out of their parents' okay. But secondly then, we told you specifically if it is that in these very same society that they want to advocate for, there are individuals who have a far better advantage in this competition game that are almost always going to be able to do what they want because of the influence that they have, while we're still justified that they should be able to develop this attitude that they should be always understanding. Because notice, if you're in a competitive environment, your ability to actualize as a child is always going to be at the detriment of another. We think it's okay for children when your bully kicks you in the face for you to stand up and say that I'm also going to punch you in the face, especially if it is that these individuals are never going to get justice specifically for who they are. On a way up then, we think our principles are a lot more proximate to these children because they're in high societies. That is to say then, we think your innocence is not going to matter if it is that you're going to engage in a competitive environment that is specifically harmful. But secondly then, who is better for their survival practically? A, they tell you about some sort of community that is going to allow these individuals to further themselves. Secondly then, they tell us that these individuals existing with an individualistic mentality is ultimately going to mean that every single time they met with opposition, like when they are wrong in specific instances, they're not going to be willing to back down. One, we tell you that they are unable to show to us specifically why a group of individuals that are adamant or not backing down until they get what they want isn't something that we are able to get on our side. Because community isn't always based on some sort of concession. It's also something that we told you is about individuals understanding that there are specific things that they are not willing to let go of, like as a specific group. We've never been more proud to.
Painting the prize for Sapo, this marks the end of the debate. Thank you guys for being a wonderful audience and staying silent. Yeah.